So I'm Nataliia, and I'm going to present this work that we've done together with the French Data Protection Authority, the CNIL, and with several other behavioral and social scientists from other French organizations. So when the users browse the web in the EU, they are encountering continuously cookie banners. And while the cookie banners are given a very easy option to accept consent, the decline option is often hidden in these banners. So sometimes it's placed in some corner of the banner, sometimes even inside the main text. Sometimes it's visible but not highlighted in the same way as the accept, or even placed outside of the main banner. So how these cookie consent banners are regulated? So in Europe, we have the data protection regulations like the Privacy Directive and GDPR, and they require that the consent of the data subject is freely given, specific, informed, and unambiguous indication of the user's wishes. So it's really important to remember that the user should be able to express their actual wishes in this kind of interfaces. But when it comes to regulation, we actually have two sides. So on one side, we have the case law, or in the US it's called precedents, where the regulators or the highest courts, like European Court of Justice, make decisions on which kind of designs are definitely violating the law. So for example, when it comes to accept and decline option, CNIL recently made decision that decline option, when it's hidden on the second layer of the banner, is definitely a violating design. So that's settled, at least for France. On the other side, we have guidelines. So guidelines are not legally binding, but they are just presenting the best practices and what the regulators believe are the compliant implementation of the design. So for example, when it comes to accept and decline, the identical interface for accept and decline options is definitely considered compliant according to several regulators, for example, the CNIL as well. But the question is, what is in the middle? We have a huge design space for cookie banners and a very big so-called gray zone where the cookie banners are neither violating their law nor are definitely compliant. So when I was working at the CNIL, I thought that I could help to actually provide more knowledge from the academia on this space and help the regulator. So it's very well known that dark patterns are actively present in cookie banners. And they deceive, coerce, and manipulate users into making choices that are not in their best interest. Researchers have also looked into the bright patterns, so the opposite of dark patterns, trying to help users actually make the choices that they would like to make. But when I was at the CNIL, I analyzed all the prior studies on measuring the impact of design on decision-making of the users, and we found that most of the studies are not specific enough to help regulators in the guidelines and the policy making. For example, there was no prior work on French population, and most of the studies actually are quite preliminary, and they aim for between 20 and 200 participants per banner, which is very small. And moreover, they differ a lot in the statistical tests that are being used, and it's really hard to compare and reuse these results. So when I was at the CNIL, we decided to run our own study, and the goal was to enlighten the CNIL's legally binding decision and recommendation related to the cookie banners. So first, we wanted to understand what is the knowledge and attitude of the users, so the knowledge about cookies and tracking technologies, and the attitude on data sharing online in general. This information has helped us to interpret our results. So we were looking into measuring the impact of dark patterns on the user's decision-making, the impact of bright and new kind of patterns on their behavior, but also we wanted to see whether the interaction with the cookie banners can actually influence the decisions of the users in the future. So together with the lawyers from the sanctions department of the CNIL, with the designers and the technology experts, we have designed 6 different banners that we wanted to test. So first, we have a control group where it is basically a banner that is recommended by the CNIL, where the accept and decline option are shown exactly in the same way. Then we have taken the example of dark pattern with what we call no decline, where the decline option is hidden on the second layer. So the user have to click on customize my choice, and after that they will be able to decline. we found that in prior work, there is only one study that have found a statistically significant result for this type of banners, but it was done only on 40 US students, so we couldn't reuse these results. We have then looked into highlighted accept, where accept and decline option are present, but accept is obviously highlighted. And then similarly to a reversed version of this, a bright pattern where the decline option is highlighted. Finally, we have designed two completely new designs where we used the idea of behavioral levers to help users make more informed decisions. So first, we have designed the consequences banner that you see in the middle, and it follows the CNIL recommendations that require users to be informed of the consequences of their choices. The prior research shows that users never read the text of the banner, so we cannot inform them through that. So we decided to actually incorporate the consequences directly in the buttons text. And finally, we also tested the three-color banner inspired by the password complexity research in the past. So our experimental design looks like this. So the users had to visit 3 different websites, on which website they would be interacting with the cookie banner. 2 times they would see a dark or bright or a new pattern, and on the 3rd interaction, they would see again a control group, so a neutral banner with identical accept and decline. And after that, we ran the user survey. So users were not aware that we are studying cookie banners. We actually asked them to search for information on these websites. So I will now show you the results of the first interaction with the website, and you can find a lot more information in the paper, especially on the survey that I don't have time today to present. Okay, so overview of our results will be shown in this form, where we see the personalization rate in gray, where users just click on customize, and it's really small. Very few people actually click on that. In blue, we see the refusal rate, so how often people actually decline consent, and the sum of the refusal and personalization on top. With stars, we see results that are statistically significant, with the p-value less than 0.001. Okay, so if we dive into the details, what do we see? We see that the banner that is hiding the decline option on the second layer has a very strong effect on the decision-making of the users, which is quite expected, but is never been shown before in prior research. We see that the refusal rate in the control group is 17%, and it goes down to 4% when the decline option is hidden. So this shows an immense impact of this kind of design on user decisions. Another example is very interesting, and it's about the consequences banner, right? So the banner where we see the accept to be traced and refuse to be traced directly in the buttons text. What we see is that the refusal rate is the highest for this type of banners, because we observe 47% of refusal with respect to 17 for the control group. A possible explanation of this is that the participants are actually around 48% of them are not ready to share their data online. So our survey actually confirms that users are not happy to share their data, and this type of banner can actually help them to make more informed decisions. Moreover, we found out that 57% of participants stated they decline consent because they want to avoid being tracked. Okay, there are many more results in the paper about various designs. What I want to show now is the impact of the decision-making on the previous banners that users interacted with. So far you've seen the results on the first interaction of the first website, and now I will show the results on the interaction on the 3rd website, where all the users were faced with a control neutral banner with equal accept and decline. So if we see that the interaction across all these groups is the refusal rate is the same, we would say that there is no impact of the past interaction on the future decision. Well, as you can guess, that's not the case. What we are seeing is that when users are interacting with the control banner, with the equal accept and decline, and they have seen only 2 times either dark or a bright or a new pattern in the past, that already changes their decision making. For example, the no decline, so the very first bar you see, it shows that 10% of people refuse with respect to 19 in the control group, which means that if we hide the decline option and we show this banner 2 times to the participants, they already changed their way of reasoning and their decision making. In the same way, when we show them the bright or new patterns, their refusal rate increases statistically significantly, up to 36%. What's interesting is that in this type of research, users, at least in the EU, are already biased. They have been interacting with this type of banners with dark patterns over time, which means that their interaction in neutral design is no longer neutral. So we have to consider other kind of information when we are building this kind of studies and when we think about the control group. Another observation is that if more websites are adopting new kind of designs that are actually helping users to make the choices that they want to make, then the adoption of this type of new patterns can already generate new habits if the popular websites are adopting this type of designs. So to conclude, we have found a lot of different impacts of dark patterns on the user decisions. For example, the no decline pattern should be prohibited everywhere, and this is not the case actually in the EU. There are some countries that are not considering this to be a violating design. The true privacy preferences or other information should be taken as a control group, additionally to this neutral type of designs, because users are already biased. And we need to study further a long-term effect of design, because that's what actually users are experiencing. Finally, we also found that legally required built-in solutions are needed. In our survey, we found that 62% of participants would be willing to use browser extensions or built-in solutions to automatize consent. In the paper, you can also find recommendations and call for action for regulators, developers, and researchers. We believe that a lot more has to be done in this space to help regulators and policymakers. Little reminder that I'm looking for a new team member. Thank you very much.